Good evening, everyone. Shalom. It's Joel Blackford with Blackford Talks Prophecy. We've got our special guest tonight, Michael Snyder. He is an expert in Bible prophecy. He's been doing this for many years. He's actually a publisher, too. So you might be reading him all over the place when you're reading or watching videos or things like that. And so let's bring Michael in. And Michael Snyder, please introduce yourself to everybody and give us your testimony.
Joel, it's great to be with you. Thank you for having me on the program tonight. It's great to be with you. And I like to say that I'm an example of how God can use literally anybody, because I was nobody at one time. I grew up, nobody ever expected much from me. Nobody ever expected me to make much of my life. And, I went to college at the University of Virginia, graduated with a business degree. Then later on went to the University of Florida Law School, where I got 2 degrees at the University of Florida Law School. Graduated from there, went back to Northern Virginia, where I started working in DC. And so every morning I would get up, go on the metro. I was just another one, because there's tons of lawyers and attorneys in DC, just hordes of them. And I was just another faceless drone getting on the metro, going into DC every day, doing work that in my view was rather meaningless. So I was getting, relatively well paid, but doing work that didn't mean anything, just, making a paycheck like so many people out there. But I had it in my heart. I wanted to do something. I wanted my life to make a mark. But I thought, what in the world can I do to make any sort of a difference? Because nobody knew who I was. Nobody cared who I was. I was literally a nobody. And so I thought, what in the world can I do? Well, eventually I started writing. And because nobody knew who I was, you could have measured my audience in those days with a microscope. I mean, basically, virtually nobody, ever saw what I was doing in those first days. But I kept at it. I kept going, and eventually the audience started to build and grow. And then at the end of 2009, I started the economic collapse blog.com. And at that time, we were in just coming out of the Great Recession. Millions of people had lost their jobs, millions of people had lost their homes. And so it really struck a chord, because people were going through a lot of economic pain, and they knew they weren't getting answers from the government. And so it started to grow very, very rapidly. And the article started to get picked up and republished other places. And then I started endoftheamericandream.com and the most important news.com. And my writing really started to take off at that point. And the articles, of course, started being republished on places like InfoWars, Alex Jones's website, Zero Hedge. To this day, Zero Hedge runs a lot of my stuff. And today you can literally find my articles on dozens and dozens of conservative websites, Christian websites, patriot websites, even, secular websites, all kinds of websites all over the globe. They republish my articles. So my articles, which on my websites alone have been viewed more than 100 million times on my websites alone, but my articles are actually read far more on other people's websites, many websites much larger than my own all over the globe. And I'm very thankful that God has opened those doors to have a platform to reach people literally all over the planet. In fact, through my newsletter alone, michaeltsnyder.substack.com, that's reaching people in more than 100 different nations every week. That's just the newsletter. And so, God's taken me and my wife, Miranda, who nobody ever knew who I was. Nobody knew who she was. She's originally from Canada, actually. And it's kind of a miracle story how we got together. But in the early days of our marriage, we were living there in Washington, D.C. area. And you think if you're going to impact the world, Washington, D.C. is a great place to do it, but God took us out of there, brought us to the mountains in the middle of nowhere. And from here, we're literally touching people through the internet all over the globe with the end times warning message, with the gospel of Jesus Christ, or Yeshua HaMashiach, for those of you that are messianic, as am I. It's great to be on Joel's show because he's messianic, I'm messianic. The vast majority of interviews I do, they're not messianics. I do secular interviews, I do Christian interviews, but the vast majority of the interviews I do, the people aren't messianic. So, they don't understand about Hebrew roots. They don't, if I say Yeshua, they don't understand what I'm saying, right, Joel?
Right. Or they don't understand this. And hopefully you people can see this. This is Michael's book, Lost Prophecies. And so most people will look at prophetic words, modern day prophetic words, and they'll kind of laugh. And Michael actually tests out prophetic words, and his wife does too, Miranda. So I respect that because we want to know our Bible, we want to know the news events, we also want to know people like Dimitri Dunin or David Wilkerson. So, Michael, yes, thank you for testing out words, modern day words.
Yeah, Joel, and it's not, there's so many words out there. People have prophetic words all the time, and then they're wrong, and you say, well, what happened? And people say, oh, I guess I missed it. What I focus on in my books are supernatural experiences, and we see it all throughout the Bible. People have visions, they have dreams, they have visitations. The angels come and visit them, or they're taken up into heaven, those type of things. But supernatural experiences where people see things with their own eyes, hear things with their own ears. They're not just saying, oh, I've got another word today. But literal supernatural experiences where people have encounters with God. And specifically what I focus on in my books are supernatural experiences where people are giving glimpses of our future. And now those things that they see and hear line up with the prophetic scriptures, what we see in the Bible, the things in the book of Revelation, Matthew 24, Luke chapter 21, Mark chapter 13, and all throughout the Bible, of course, the things that are talked about that pertain to our times line up with the supernatural experiences, real supernatural experiences. I'm not talking about the false prophets out there that were predicting there would be a rapture in September. Remember those jokers? Or these other people who have prophetic words that fail all the time. I'm talking about real supernatural experiences. Just like throughout the Bible, there were false prophets and true prophets. Same thing today. There's a lot of false prophets, but there are also true prophets who really are giving glimpses into our future. And many of the things that they've seen have come to pass. And then all that is lining up with the headlines that we're seeing in our world today. Bible prophecy is literally coming true right in front of our eyes. So we see a confluence, all these things are converging. Bible prophecy, the scriptures, along with the supernatural experiences that God has been given to people for a number of decades. In my book, I go back actually in some cases hundreds of years. This is the new book. Joel showed you the old book, Lost
The old
Prophecies
book,
of the
yeah,
Future of
from
America.
2020.
This
Yep.
is a great book to go along with it. 10 prophetic events that are coming next.
Okay.
In fact, one of them is, and I don't want to spoil the surprise, and we're going to talk about Iran and Israel today,
Sure.
but this is the latest book right here. But it's all lining up, Joel. We really are in a time like it talks about in the book of Joel. In the last
Mhm.
days, your young men will, have visions. Your old men will dream dreams. And so many people have been given glimpses. And when you start lining them up, you see, wow, they all really, people that are separated by time and space and geography, different parts of the world, but the things that they've been shown all line up. I'm talking about the real prophets, supernatural experiences they have. They so many of them, you read them, they go, wow, they were all talking about the same thing, and that's because they're getting them from the same source. But in any event, I am messianic, I'm charismatic, I'm evangelical, I'm a Christian, I'm a believer, I was raised Baptist, you know, I have a foot in a lot of doors, and so people have a hard time categorizing me because I like you, Joel. I'm messianic. We just finished celebrating the Feast of Tabernacles. We keep Sabbath here, right? But I'm not just speaking to the Hebrew roots community. My calling, I believe, and the doors God has opened for me, is to speak to the entire body of Messiah. So I'm not just a Hebrew roots teacher, although I'm Hebrew roots, I'm Messianic. And in fact, my calling is not just to talk to the body of Christ, because if you're familiar, if you see my stuff all over the place and you go, oh, wow, that's a secular website, but Michael Snyder stuff keeps popping up on it, as that's part of my calling. Because most Christian authors, they're preaching to the choir, right? They've got a specific Christian audience. But I have a very, very large secular audience. I'm very thankful for that, because those are the people I really want to reach, because those are the people that need Messiah. Those are the people that are lost. Those are the people that are heading for an eternity without Yeshua. And so, yeah, I want to talk to the world. I want to talk to the lost. I want to talk to the people, because right now, today, there are, we live in a world where there's 8 billion souls on this planet today. Billions of souls are hanging in the balance. And I want to be a soul winner. I want to reach people with the good news of the gospel. And so that's a little bit about me, Joel. Hopefully people find that helpful out there.
So once again, there's 1 Thessalonians 5:18 through 20 that describes how we're supposed to listen and basically, I'll paraphrase and say, chew on prophecies and then test them out and hold on to that which is good. And Michael and Miranda do that. And so, they're both testing out prophecies. They're both, is this one going to work out, or is there a flaw within this person or whatever else? And so we're supposed to do that, people. We're not supposed to just dismiss it all. So Michael and I, and Miranda, of course, too, are continuationists, and there are cessationists that would say it's done, it's over with. God doesn't speak anymore, but God does. Otherwise, we're in big trouble. If God just threw us on the planet and said, "Here, eke it out until the end," we're in big trouble. We're in much better shape with God talking and communicating with us, right, Michael?
Yeah. It's funny because the book of Joel specifically tells us in the last days there will be dreams, there will be visions, all of this. So, but I understand. I was raised in a Baptist church that didn't believe in these things growing up, and so as a child, so I would see something in a dream, and then later on I'd be like, I would actually be at that place, I'd look around and I was like, I've seen this before, and people are like, oh no, that doesn't happen. I didn't understand it because people are like, that doesn't happen today, it's not real. Or I would see something in a dream and then it would happen and people are like, no, 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 you're just imagining things. God is a God of the supernatural, has been all the way from the book of Genesis all the way through the book of Revelation. All throughout history, God is a God of the supernatural. And the supernatural, it's funny, Joel, because we have all these Christians today. First of all, they want to throw out the first part of the book, which is three
Mhm.
quarters of the Bible. They call it the Old Testament, right? But they want to throw out all the script, all the Old Testament scriptures. They want to get rid of that. Then they look at the New Testament and they're like, well, hold on a second. I don't like all this stuff about dreams and visions and about the gifts of the Holy Spirit. I want to throw that out, and then they want to start throwing other things out, throughout the New Testament. And so then they end up with, some sayings of Jesus and some things from the epistles of Paul that they like. But this Swiss cheese Christianity, which is thrown, the Torah out and most of the Old Testament out, much of the New Testament out, and it's this powerless Swiss cheese Christianity, which and then it's just kind of ridiculous. But the whole Bible is one faith, one scripture, one story, and we get to be here at such a critical moment in human history when the story is building up to a crescendo. We get to be here to prepare the way for the return of our Lord and Savior, Yeshua HaMashiach in Hebrew. And it's such an exciting time to be alive. So we're going to talk about some hard things tonight, some difficult things. And people say, oh, all that end time stuff, that is bad news. In fact, I've been called the king of doom and gloom, because people read my stuff, right? and they say, oh, Michael's always talking about bad news. But if you have the right perspective, it's actually good news because we're leading up to the end of the story. When something bad happens, well, in reality, what it is, it's an indication that what we believe is true because it's a sign of the end times. Almost everything I talk about are signs of the end times. It's evidence that what we believe is true. And it also tells us that the hope that we're looking forward to, yeah, we've got some stuff to go through first, but once it's all over, we get to be with Yeshua forever and ever and ever. And that's a greater ending to the story, to our story, than anything that Hollywood has ever dreamed of.
Amen. There you go. Preach it. So the main thing is we're both Messianics, we're both Hebrew roots, and what we do is we delve into the first 5 books, the Pentateuch or the Torah, and we look at things like Deuteronomy 13 and Deuteronomy 18. So when we're testing out the prophets, we're testing them out in terms of do they match up with what Moses described? Because Paul doesn't really give you those criteria. He just says test things out. So when we go back and test through Moses, do the prophets match up or not? So Michael has that mindset. It is helpful to go in and say, do these prophetic words match up with the whole book of the Bible, not just maybe a couple of Pauline sections? And so I agree with him. I think it's critical for us to really spend time in Moses to figure out what's happening today.
Yeah, and you got to understand the beginning of the book to understand the end of the book, Joel. And
Right.
and this is something we should talk about tonight because we've got a Hebrew roots audience,
Right.
but you've got to understand the our Father's calendar if you're going to understand the end times. So many of these Christian teachers, end times teachers, they're kind of flopping around, trying to understand timelines, trying to understand things. But if you don't understand the calendar, I mean, you're going to miss so much. You're going to have such a difficult time. But once you understand the calendar, things start making a whole lot more sense. And I'm not just talking about the festivals. Of course, the spring festivals were fulfilled by Yeshua's first coming. The fall festivals will be largely fulfilled by the second coming. And the end times and all these things we're moving into, the fall festivals are going to kind of take center stage. And it's a very exciting time. But I'm not just talking about that. But Joel, at some point tonight, we should talk about what is a day, because most people have no idea what a day actually is, or what is a week, or what is a month, or what is a year. And actually, that is something that most Hebrew roots, most Messianics don't even understand. What is a year? How is a year defined? It's very simple once you understand it, but because most Messianics, they just kind of go along with what the rabbis say and Jewish tradition, they don't even understand what a year is. And the way that, uh, you know, and we can get into this later, but even the way that the ancients looked at what a year is compared to us, because to us, any period of 365 days is a year, right? And I could say, well, Joel, I'll talk to you again in a year, which would be next October 15th, right? But
Right.
that's not how the ancients looked at it. They would say, next year at this time we'll speak again. To them, a year is not any segment of 365 days. Of course, a year is never 365 days, in the Bible, or it's not defined as that. And we can talk about that. But to us, we think that any period of 365 days, we can just go forward and that's a year. No, to the in the Bible and to ancient Israel, a year was the specifically defined period of time beginning at a specific moment and ending at a specific moment, and that's the only thing that's considered to be a year. But that's something we could perhaps talk about as we go along with this program.
Sounds like fun. Okay, so we're going to switch the screen up a little bit and we're going to go into some of our topics here. And so, because Michael's an expert at many different things. So, first of all, he wrote this. So, once again, The End of the American Dream is one of his many publications. And so, in order for peace to be taken away, a state of peace must exist first. That's your article. It's fresh. It's October 10th. Has the stage been set for something really, really big to happen? After I posted my article about the end of the war in Gaza, I started reflecting on what it might mean in the grand scheme of things. And then, so Michael, tell us a little bit. Why did you write this article? What are you talking about? Why do we need peace before we go into peace being taken away?
Well, that's a great question, Joel. You know, this realization dawned on me, once we got this Trump peace agreement, because I had been watching for peace to be taken away from the Middle East, but we didn't have a state of peace to be taken, right? Because the Middle East has been in a state of war for 2 years. There was a state of war since October 7th, 2023. We had Hamas invade in Israel, take the hostages, and then the war erupted. And it's funny because we were talking about some of these prophecies, right, Joel?
Mm-hmm.
Henry Groover said that once Israeli troops go into Gaza, that will be a sign that the war in the Middle East has begun, when Henry Groover was still alive. So Hamas went in Israel, then Israeli troops went into Gaza, and that was kind of the beginning of the big Middle East war, right? So we had the conflict in Gaza. Israel had the thing with Hezbollah, with the exploding pagers. They were exchanging missiles with Yemen, and then the whole 12-day war with Iran erupted. But
Yep.
for 2 years, we had this big war in the Middle East, constant state of war. We didn't have a state of peace to be taken away. But now we've had this twist, this funny twist, with Trump coming in with his 20-point peace plan, bringing a temporary state of peace in the Middle East. So now we have a ceasefire in Gaza, we got a ceasefire with Iran. Things are calm in the Middle East for the first time in 2 years.
Okay.
And to me, that's very significant because I'm actually, one of the things I'm watching for is the peace to be taken away. I think that is something that's going to transpire in the Middle East that I'm watching for very, very carefully. But in order for that to happen, a state of peace must happen first. So now we have that. Now we have a state of peace in the Middle East, Trump's 20-point peace plan. But already there's rumblings that there are problems because, first of all, Hamas is saying, "Well, we're not gonna actually disarm. We're not
Right.
gonna lay
Yeah.
down all of our arms," which is
Right.
something that's in Trump's peace plan. So Trump just came out and said, "You know what? If Hamas won't disarm, I'm going to force them to disarm." Right? He just
Right.
made that
Yep.
threat.
Yep.
And so, well, how are you going to do that, Trump? Are you going to send in troops? Are you going to bomb Hamas? I mean, what are you going to do make them disarm, right? And then Netanyahu just came out and he was like, "Well, I hope that Hamas can be disarmed peacefully, but I'm not sure. We'll see how it goes." But we wanted to implement the first phase of the peace plan and get the hostages. This is what Netanyahu was saying. But now
Wasn't
we're
it a
saying, well,
shock?
moving forward. Oh, go
Wasn't
ahead,
it a
Joel.
shock to even have the hostages come out? I figured Hamas would play games and never let the hostages out. They came out on schedule. That was a miracle.
Yeah, it was very exciting. But now that there's a big uproar in Israel because, well, they don't have many bodies of the dead hostages to return, right?
Yeah.
And personally, I think a lot of those bodies are gone. I think
Yeah.
many of those bodies will never be returned. But the families of the hostages are saying, "Hey, look, we got to cancel this peace deal because we're not getting the bodies of our dead hostages back, and we're very upset about that." So there's this big uproar in Israel that the bodies of the hostages aren't being returned, and so that's another reason why the peace deal might collapse. But this thing is very tenuous; it's kind of hanging by a thread. That was actually a phrase from the Daily Mail article I quoted today, hanging by a thread, this peace deal. So it could collapse at any time. Meanwhile, Iran is kind of on high alert. They're concerned Israel could attack again. Things are very tense. And so I'm watching. We've got a state of peace, but that state of peace could be taken away very soon or in a few weeks or who knows exactly when. But that's what I'm expecting. That personally, that's what I'm watching for, Joel, is for peace to be taken away. Of course, not only from the Middle East, but Joel, today B-52 bombers were circling in near Venezuelan airspace. Trump
Oh,
just approved CIA operations inside Venezuela. There's been this mobilization of U.S. forces, and in fact, there have been practicing for potential military operations in Venezuela. In Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro is mobilizing his forces. He's extremely concerned. They're mobilizing the military. They just called an emergency session of the UN Security Council because they're so concerned about a U.S. invasion. Trump just bombed another narcotics boat, this time apparently operated by people from Colombia. The
oh,
Colombian government's very upset. They were already upset before this, but now they're even more upset. And so our relations with Colombia are going downhill, not just Venezuela, but this whole thing. So now we got South America. We got wars and rumors of wars there. We just had Afghanistan and Pakistan. They
yeah.
were going at it. They just agreed to a 48-hour ceasefire there. Our relations with China are going downhill really, really quickly. But then one of the biggest things is that Zelensky is coming to the White House, right? And Trump just said, "Hey, and maybe I'll give Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine," which is literally insane, Joel.
Mhm.
Literally insane, because Tomahawk missiles, right? They were originally designed to carry conventional warheads or nuclear warheads, right?
Yep.
Okay. And now Tomahawk missiles, we give them to Ukraine, but they can't be fired without they have specific platforms which we have to give them. So our missiles on our platforms that we give to him, and then we would literally have to guide them to the targets deep inside Russia. Now, when the Russians see the Tomahawk missiles coming, they can't tell if it's a conventional warhead or nuclear warhead.
Right.
All they see is Tomahawk coming, right?
Right.
So
Yep.
these missiles, which can be equipped with nuclear warheads, the Russians are going to see them coming in. Are they just going to say, well, we'll just wait till they explode in our major cities and see if they're conventional or nuclear?
No.
No. What are they going to do? What would we do if cruise missiles that could potentially be equipped with nuclear warheads were coming toward Washington, D.C. or New York City? How would we respond? Right?
Yep.
So it's wars and rumors of wars giving Ukraine Tomahawk cruise missiles would put us right on the brink of nuclear war with Russia, which is one of the things that I talk about in my book, which is one of the things I've been talking about for well over a decade, because we knew in advance that these days were coming. So the things that are in the headlines today, in fact, the specific wars, I call them the three wars of the apocalypse: the war in the Middle East, war with China, war with Russia. I've been talking about for well over a decade, talk about in my books, talk about in my new book, 10 prophetic events that are coming next.
There it is.
Do you
Yeah.
see
We
it
can see it
there?
now. Yep. Yep.
Because we knew the God who created all things, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has told us that all these things are coming in advance. We knew they were coming in advance. And yet, who's talking about them? What churches are talking about them? What prominent Christian leaders are talking about them? Even though God gave us warning after warning after warning after warning that these things were coming in advance, I've been trying to warn as loudly as I can. Don't do this. Don't do this. Um, and yet, our leaders continue to take us all, not just all over the world. Global leaders have a case of war fever, bringing us toward these wars that we've been warned about. And I feel sometimes, Joel, I feel like I'm watching a slow motion train wreck that I can't do anything about. It's this great
Right.
tragedy unfolding in front of my eyes, and yet these things are coming. These things are unfolding. These things are happening. But it's a tremendous, tremendous tragedy.
Okay. But you're willing to consider that peace has to occur before we go to war. So there has to be some kind of a time of peace. Now, we don't know exactly how long that'll be. Everybody says it's a 7-year peace agreement. Well, it's a peace agreement, but then you will have war. So would you agree, Michael, that we'll probably have a World War III at some point in time?
Oh yeah, definitely World War III. In fact, you look at the book of Revelation, right? And you got the seal judgments, and it mentions war as one of the factors that will kill a very large portion of the global population, right? Just
Yep.
during the seal judgments, you know. Um, so and then and I so and Jesus talked about in Matthew 24, wars and rumors of wars. War is one of the big themes of the end times. It's one of the and it cracks me up, Joel, because these people who have believed these stories, they say the Antichrist is going to come in, and then we're going to have 3.5 years of peace. No,
No.
no. Just read the seal judgments in the book of Revelation. Read about war. Read about all the people that are going to die. I don't know where they get this because the story that people have been told is not what's actually in the book of Revelation.
Right. Yeah, you're right. Okay, so now we're talking about peace and how to achieve peace. And it looks like Kushner and Witkoff and Trump, of course, are deal makers. According to the left hand side here, they're leveraging peace, but they're deal makers, figures who understand that peace is achieved not through protocol, which is what all presidents have done for the last 150, 200 years, but through persuasion, proximity, and exercise of power. And now I'm moving to the right hand side where it's more bold print: peace through strength and stability through shared prosperity. And then the bottom paragraph: critics accuse Kushner of blurring the line between business and diplomacy. They misunderstand the strategy. In today's Middle East, capital is the essence of leverage, and leverage is peace. Comments, Michael?
Well, it's interesting. Trump is a businessman and his family, they're business people, right?
Yeah.
And so they're using commerce, they're using business in international diplomacy in different ways than we've ever seen before, right? It's business and trade and money is being used as levers of power, being used as leverage. And so I think we see this in the Middle East and the in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar, in the United Arab Emirates. They speak Trump's language because they're wealthy, they have money. And we saw Trump go over when he did his Middle Eastern tour. He was welcomed as a king, right? He was
Oh,
given
yeah.
this grand welcome wherever he went, and they were very much speaking Trump's language because Trump wants validation, he wants respect, he wants people to love him, and so all of that Trump just gobbled all that up. But ultimately, what they want, what Saudi Arabia and Qatar and the United Arab Emirates want, is a Palestinian state. That's what they want more than anything else, and they think Trump is the one that's going to give it to them.
Sure.
And ultimately, you read through Trump's 20-point peace plan, and they recognize in the peace plan that, hey, the Palestinian people want a Palestinian state, and yeah, we're going to have a temporary technocratic government to kind of govern Gaza and whatever, but the ultimate goal is a Palestinian state, and that's why these Arab countries have kind of signed on to it, because what they want is a Palestinian state. And you know what? And we forget that Jared Kushner and Donald Trump, they were the ones in Trump's first term, back in Trump's first term, they drafted and put together the most comprehensive Middle East peace agreement that anyone has ever seen. And it included a Palestinian state.
Sure.
So Trump and the Trump administration are very much in favor of a Palestinian state. Now they didn't want to acknowledge a Palestinian state before the war was over, before the fighting stopped. They didn't want to reward Hamas while the fighting was still going on. So they were like, we're not going to do this. That's why they didn't participate in September with this whole thing at the United Nations. They're like, we can't do this while the war's still going on. We're not going to reward Hamas. But the end goal is still the same. They want peace, which ultimately means a Palestinian state. They want the Abraham Accords, which Saudi Arabia has said, hey, we're never going to do this Abraham Accords thing with Israel. We're not going to do normalization with Israel without a Palestinian state. But the Trump and Netanyahu, they're knowing this, they still say, yeah, we want the Abraham Accords with Saudi Arabia. The long-term goal in the end is to get to a Palestinian state. And the Trump and Kushner and all of them are very much on board with that. And that is an extremely dangerous thing. And that is something that must not ever, ever happen. Right, Joel?
Oh yeah.
Because a Palestinian state, any administration that is involved in creating a Palestinian state will be cursed. Any country, which if the U.S. is involved, which it will be someday in creating a Palestinian state, will be cursed, and the consequences will be beyond catastrophic.
So there's a book out there. You didn't write it, but you've quoted it a few times, Eye to Eye, and basically it talks about whenever we trade land for peace with the Palestinians, say we have a storm or we have some horrible catastrophe, a plague come against. And what is his name? I'm blanking on his name right now. Jewish fellow, messianic, kind of like you and I. But
Oh, Bill Koenig?
Bill Koenig. Bill Koenig. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So Bill has been writing about this for 20 years, and you've seen it, you've written, and you've paraphrased him a few times over the years. You realize that as soon as you trade land for peace, something horrible happens to America or anybody.
Yeah, going all the way back to Jimmy Carter, in that
Yeah.
peace agreement, we see when there's a dividing of the land, or efforts to divide the land, there's judgment that comes upon us, right? So we've seen this pattern is well documented for so many years. Our leaders never seem to learn, but now the big one's coming, Joel, the really big one, because we're coming up and we're going to see ultimately an agreement to create a Palestinian state. And when that happens, and I talk about this in the new book,
Okay.
people have been shown, we're talking about these supernatural glimpses into the future, right? For decades, people have been shown, and during these experiences over and over again, God tells them the same thing. If you divide my land, I'm going to divide your land. Specifically, what they've been shown over and over again, people have been shown this. There is going to be a cataclysmic earthquake which literally divides North America in half, specifically from the Great Lakes all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. The United States will be ripped in two, creating a new body of water that flows from the Great Lakes all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. You won't even be able to drive across it because it's so wide. You'll have to literally fly from one half of the United States to the other half of the United States. Because the catastrophe, because the earthquake, the chasm, and the new body of water will be so vast. It'll be unlike anything that we've ever seen before, but it comes after the division of the land of Israel and the creation of a Palestinian state. So that's one of the most important prophetic markers that we are looking for. That's what we're watching for. But it is a judgment that will be coming upon this nation. That's why we must not ever do that. We must not ever divide the land of Israel, but that's where events are taking us. Of course, the whole world is clamoring for it. France and Saudi Arabia, and we just saw that big thing at the United Nations in September when all the pre-trib people thought the pre-trib rapture was going to take place, right? There was that
Yeah.
big conference
Yeah.
about dividing the land of Israel,
Right.
creating a
Yeah.
Palestinian state. Trump didn't want to do it at that time. He wanted the war to be over first. He wanted the peace agreement, So that's why the U.S. didn't participate. That was a good thing. We didn't participate in that thing at the United Nations in September. But hey, we're continue to move toward that. That's the plan. That's, the plan is to transition toward that. And so that's what we're moving toward, Joel. We need to continue to
Yeah.
sound the alarm. We
Yeah.
must not divide the land of Israel and when we do, the United States will be physically divided in two. It is coming. So many people have seen it. And
Yeah.
Joel,
Yeah.
as a reminder, right? We had the Great American Eclipse in
Yeah.
2024, the first day of the first month of the biblical calendar. It finished the giant X over the New Madrid
Yeah.
fault zone, which had begun 7 years earlier by the first Great American Eclipse. We had the giant X over the New Madrid fault zone. Also, on that time, the Aleph over America was completed, the Tav over America was completed. It was one of the most spectacular signs in the heavens that we've ever seen. And yet, it came, it went, and then people forgot about it. People quit talking about it. But one of the things it was a warning. When you put a giant X over the New
Yeah.
Madrid fault zone, you think people will get the message. But no, No, but it was literally the creator of the universe warning us, do not divide the land of Israel or your nation will be divided. And here's where it's going to be divided.
Right there. Yeah. And there are many prophetic visions of that area by different people. And so Michael and I have chronicled those things for years. And we won't share all the people tonight. So leverage peace again. There are these peace verses that we cite all the time. First Thessalonians 5:3, for when they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes. And Michael's kind of describing that sudden destruction, after that peace and safety time frame. And then Ezekiel 38 talks about it in a similar way. You will say, I am going to invade a land of unwalled villages. I will take by surprise these people who are at peace, living securely, all in places without walls, bars, or gates. I will seize the spoil and take the plunder. You will attack the former ruins that are now inhabited and come against the people gathered from the nations. Ezekiel 38. So we've cited over the years, you and I, Wilkerson, Dudeman, other people that have mentioned that there will be this peacetime frame, but there will be a war at the end. And so, let's see, occur before World War III. Even though everyone is screaming World War III is at the doorstep, there has to be peace first again. So, any comments, Michael?
Yeah. The Trump wants peace. Everyone wants peace. And yet we keep moving toward war. But I am watching for major events to happen in the Middle East. I'm watching for horrible conflict, and ultimately, you talk about the red horse. You talk about Revelation chapter 6. You talk about peace being taken from the earth.
Yep.
That's the second seal, right? That's the
Yes.
red horse. That is something that we are watching for. So we are at such I believe we're such a critical time. I believe major events are about to happen right at the door, right in front of
Sure.
us. So yeah, we are at a time when global events are really going to accelerate, Joel.
Okay. And then could it be the Jubilee year? Now you've got a different time frame, and that's fine. But some of these events that we've just watched seem Jubilee-ish. Proclaim the year of the favor of Adonai of God, the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort those who mourn. Yes, provide for those in Zion who mourn. Isaiah 61. Any thoughts about the Jubilee time frame and where you think we are on the Jubilee count?
Well, that is what a controversial question, Joel, right?
Yeah.
Now, just about every Hebrew roots teacher has a different perspective on the Jubilee, right?
Yep.
And you've got all the Messianic people who believe in the 49-year cycle and the 50-year cycle, right?
Right.
Right,
Oh yeah.
Joel?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Do you mind if I ask you what you are, 49 or 50 year?
I'm a 50. Khan is a 50-year person. Mark Biltz, I'm very close friends with Mark Biltz. He's a 49er. So I've always gone 50. I just kind of felt that you were cheating the next cycle of the Shemitah if you take 1 year away from that. So I believe it
Yeah.
has to be 50.
Yeah, Joel, I believe in the 50-year cycle as well.
Okay.
I think it's very clear to me, and we see it practiced every year with the whole cycle leading up to Pentecost, Pentecost being the 50th day. We got the 50th year. And if you look at the Torah, I think it's very clear that it's 49 years, then a 50th year, and to me, all of God's I I believe that God has a 7,000 year plan for humanity, 6,000 years, and then the 1,000 year millennium. And I believe the 6,000 years are divided up into 120 Jubilee cycles. I believe the Exodus happened on a Jubilee year. I believe that Yeshua died on the cross on a Jubilee year. And I believe that Yeshua will return on a Jubilee year. And the Jubilee is literally the year of return, right? The return to your possession, the return to the land. And that's a prophetic foreshadowing of the return of Yeshua. So if you understand the Jubilee cycle, the year of Jubilee is the year of return, which is the year of the return of the Messiah. So I believe the Jubilee year is the year of return. I believe that Yeshua literally has to return on a year of Jubilee. That's my perspective that I'm sharing. And I believe it fits into the cycle because I believe Yeshua will return on the year 6,000. And then there's the
Okay.
1,000 year reign of Messiah from Jerusalem. Okay, so I believe Yeshua returns on the year of Jubilee, which is on the 120th Jubilee, year 6,000, and then we begin the 1,000 year reign of Messiah from Jerusalem. So, and I believe that you can look in Ezekiel, the book of Ezekiel, and I talk about this in one of my books. In the book of Ezekiel, it talks about the 30th year, which many people believe refers to the 30th year of a Jubilee cycle. And it talks about that 30th year corresponding to the reign of a specific king. And then if you calculate that down to the present day, we can get an idea of when each Jubilee year falls from the Bible, from the Bible. So, and it doesn't correspond with how the rabbis calculate their Jubilee cycle or many of the other cycles I've seen. But according to that, Joel, according to that, how you calculate the Jubilee cycles going back to Ezekiel,
Yeah.
then it corresponds with Yeshua dying on the cross in 30 AD in the Jubilee year that began in the spring of 30 AD and concluding in the following spring, because this is somewhere I diverge with almost everyone. But the Bible says there's only one beginning of a year. In the book of Exodus, it says the year begins in the spring. The first month of the year is in the spring. There's nothing about the year beginning on the first day of the seventh month. That's something the Jewish people picked up in Babylon. They even admit that. I read an article in one of the big Israeli newspapers. It was all about, yeah, we picked that up in Babylon. Then when we started, because they celebrated the beginning of the year in the fall, and so we started doing it. So we started calling the Feast of Trumpets Rosh Hashanah, the new year.
Yep.
But before the Babylonian captivity, we never did that, you know. And so they understand, they know, but they call it Rosh Hashanah anyway, and they call it Happy New Year. But it's not, according to the Bible, it's not the beginning of the year. The beginning of the year is in the spring, and Jubilee years do not begin on Rosh Hashanah. And now the return to the land and is happens on Yom Kippur when they blow the trumpet. So that's when the return to the land occurs during the Jubilee year. But the Jubilee year begins in the spring, ends in the spring, but the trumpet is blown on Yom Kippur. That's when you return to the land during the Jubilee year. So you don't
Yes.
return to the land on the first day of the Jubilee year, but it's inside the Jubilee year on Yom Kippur. That's when they blow the trumpet and then you return, right? Which
Yep.
foreshadows, actually, Joel, the return of Messiah with his armies on Yom Kippur. We're all dressed in white, like they dressed in white on Yom Kippur. The armies of Yeshua following Yeshua on Yom Kippur, returning to this earth on Yom Kippur. And that's what the entire book of Joel, your name is
Yeah.
Joel,
Oh
right?
yeah. Yeah.
If
Oh
you
yeah.
read the book of Joel, and I'll just give this to you real fast because we got a lot of time tonight. If you read
Yeah.
the book of Joel, you see a fast, right? You
Yep.
see a blowing of a trumpet, and you
Yep.
see a solemn assembly. When
Okay.
do all those three things happen? You see the psalmist, a fast with a solemn assembly, Yom Kippur. The
Yom
blowing of the
Kippur.
trumpet is the year of Jubilee,
Mhm.
right? On the Yom Kippur on the year of Jubilee. So
Sure.
you see that in the book of Joel, and then you see the description in Joel chapter 2, Yeshua with his armies coming, the greatest army in all of human history, coming on horses, riding into Israel, riding into Jerusalem. It's about Yeshua with his armies riding in on Yom Kippur in the year of Jubilee. It's all there in the book of Joel, which is that happens to be your name.
It works for me. So you're right. I mean, there's so much Yom Kippur symbology in the Bible, especially in Joel, of course, but also in other areas. Where you've got the heap of incense that's cast into, say, good. Numbers 16, rather, where the core rebellion and Aaron grabs a bunch of incense, and that breaks the plague. But then also in Revelation 8, you have heaps of incense being cast onto the earth by the angels. So these are Yom Kippur pictures. They're everywhere. So please, people, study Yom Kippur. It gives you a clearer picture of what's coming up in the end times. Okay.
Oh, it absolutely does. Of course, you
Yeah,
got Rosh Hashanah too, the Feast of Trumpets,
sure.
you know, and so forth, and the resurrection happens at the last trumpet. That's not a coincidence, you know. So
Yeah.
you got the resurrection at the last trumpet, and you got the Feast of Trumpets. You know, it's all there, and I've written about all this in my books if people want to study it in depth. But the fall festivals are all about the end times. They're all about the return of Yeshua. They're all about the things that are going to happen in our future because we are living in the end times.
Yes. The other interesting thing is the actual name for Rosh Hashanah is going to be Yom Teruah, the day of the war or battle call. And so you wouldn't have Yeshua returning for, an ingathering based off a call for war or battle. You would have him returning for that to battle, but not necessarily, so it's a battle call. It just is. So it has meaning, though. I mean, obviously, all of these festivals, Yom Teruah, Yom Kippur, and then Sukkot. Sukkot is a festival of nations, and that also is figured in especially Zechariah 14. It's huge. So anyway, let's move. Yeah, Michael,
Yeah.
whatever you
Yeah,
were
there was
going to
one
say.
more point I was going to throw in because
Yeah,
this is very interesting,
yeah,
right? We're told that Antichrist gets 3.5 years to do his thing and then
sure,
Yeshua returns, right?
right.
Okay. Now, in ancient Israel, a year is specifically designed. Okay, a year has a specific definition. It goes from the first day of the year to the last day of the year, and then a new year begins at the first day of the year. A year is a fixed segment of time. It's not like how
Mm-hmm.
we do today. Oh, a year from October 15th is the next October 15th. That's not a year. That's not a year. Just like in ancient Israel, a day begins at sunset, then to the following sunset, right?
Right,
It's not like, oh, I'll see you in a day from now. That's not in the Bible or to the ancient Israelites. That's not a day. A day is not any 24-hour period. In fact, a day cannot be 24 hours because the days are constantly getting shorter or longer, right?
right.
But in the Bible, a year is a fixed unit of time from the first day of the month. Then another year begins once we get to the next first day of the first month. And so when you're talking about 3.5 years, you go 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, fixed units of time. Then you go half a year, 6 months. And then the first day of the seventh month is what? Rosh Hashanah.
Sure.
Rosh Hashanah. So that clue has been there all that time. Everyone's missed it.
Oh, yeah.
Where 3.5 years, at the end of a half a year, it's not just 6 months. It's not. It's a fixed period of time on the biblical calendar. 6 months. The first day of the seventh month. What is the first day of the seventh month? It's Rosh Hashanah. It's Yom. I shouldn't even use that term. It's really Yom Teruah, Feast of
Yom Teruah,
Trumpets.
yeah, yeah.
And so that is the Antichrist gets 3.5 years to do his thing, and then boom, Yom Teruah hits. Exactly, precisely lines up. And just about everyone's missed it because they thought, well, 3.5 years can mean anything. But no, they are fixed units of time.
Yes. And we see the counts mentioned in Daniel 7 and Revelation 12, where I'll give it to you in the Hebrew first, but it's Moed, Moedim, Moed, or no, Moed, Moedim, and then Vachetzi. And so that matches up with the Greek exactly too. So what they're trying to warn you about is things are going to start harmonizing with the festival to festival, and they're about every 6 months. And so Michael's trying to describe to you that same process of 6 months to 6 months. That's what you're counting, and not exactly 6 months. It's based on the new moon sightings and things like that, but it is based on the festivals, the Moedim.
Yeah, well, a month. A month to us is what, 30 days, 31 days, whatever. But, just throw all that out because a month goes from new moon to new moon.
New moon. Yeah.
That's to God, that's what a month is.
Yes.
To people, all these people say, oh, do you celebrate Sabbath on a Saturday or a Sunday? And my response is neither, because to God, Saturday is not a day. Sunday is not a day. A day begins at sunset and a day ends it goes to the following sunset. A day, the Sabbath is from Friday sundown to Saturday sundown. That's what
Yes.
a day. And the first day of the week begins on Saturday night. You know, so because it's a fixed unit of time, a day is a fixed unit of time. A week, we celebrate the weekly Sabbath because all throughout human history, a week is a fixed unit of time, 7 days, uninterrupted from the very beginning. 7 days, 7 days, 7 days, and that begins at the first day of the week, ends at the conclusion of the seventh day of the week, which happens the seventh day of the week ends on Saturday evening. And then a month, it goes from new moon to new moon. That's God's definition, new moon to new moon. A month comes from moon originally. The ancients understood this very well. A month, it's all about the moon. It's
It
all
is.
about the cycles of the moon. And so then anyway, I could go on indefinitely about this, but the whole way that the Christian church and even many Messianics look at the calendar and look at how segments of time are defined, it's all wrong. And so they're all haywire, so they don't understand.
Now, signs in the skies. We've had blood moon eclipses before. Michael wrote on this just the other day here, and I think I pulled this up via Rapture Ready, but it's four green comets are racing through our solar system at a moment in human history when global events are about to go absolutely nuts. And so I'll continue reading. You published this through the end of the American Dream. Have you ever heard of four green or giant green comets roaring through our solar system at the same time? In all my years, I have never seen anything like this. Atlas, Lemon, Swan are all visible from the Earth right now, and also interstellar visitor 3I Atlas, which is a bizarre comet or whatever asteroid, and will be visible and coming up during this interesting time as we end Sukkot. So, what are your comments about comets?
Well, this is very interesting, right? Because Yeshua, he told us to watch for signs in the heavens, right? We were
Yep.
told there would be signs in the sun, moon, and stars before his return. Now, we don't know exactly what those are going to look like, but we should be watching, right? We should be watching. And earlier we talked about the eclipse forming the giant X over the New Madrid fault zone. I believe that was a sign, in the heavens. That was very, very important. Most people really didn't get it. But in terms of these comets, that really got my attention because all of these four comets, first of all, they're green. All four are green. All four are large, very large. But we didn't know about any of them before
Right?
this year. They were all discovered in 2025. Okay, so they were all discovered this year. One of them is named Atlas, not to be confused with interstellar visitor 3I Atlas, which has come from outside our solar system. But you got
Right.
Atlas, Lemon, Swan, and then 3I Atlas. And all four of them will make their closest approaches to Earth between October 19th and December. I forget which date it was in the article. Oh, I'm sorry, October 20th to December 19th.
Yes.
So
So it's
within a
coming
two
up.
month period, all four of them are going to make their closest approaches to Earth. Now, none of them are supposed to come really close. None of them are supposed to hit us. But it's just very strange that at this time, when global events I believe, are about to go absolutely nuts, all of a sudden we got not one comet, not two, not three, but four giant green comets racing through our solar system simultaneously. We've never seen anything quite like this before. And now we've got global events about to go crazy. In particular, 3I Atlas, very, very strange. There's this new article from this Harvard, astrophysicist Avi Loeb.
Yep.
He says now that it could be somewhere around 5 times as large as Earth. I mean, it's just absolutely gigantic, and it's been spewing water, just torrential amounts of water every single second. Just vast amounts of water are being expelled by this thing. Now, if it came from another solar system, or if it came from some distant place that we don't even know, how long has it been spewing this amount of water? I mean, because it's just expelling just vast amounts of water constantly. So how much water did it originally have? How much water does it have now? Where did it get that water? I mean, that's really weird that it's got all this water and it's just spewing water everywhere. And then there's all kinds of speculation. Is it a natural occurring thing, or is it artificial, or is it a probe from another solar system? And lots of people have all kind of speculation about that. And so we'll see what happens. I don't think it's an extraterrestrial. I don't think it has anything to do with aliens or whatever, personally. But I think it's very interesting that we've got all these comets coming through our solar system right now, um, and it's interesting that there's been more than 100 objects which has come very, very close to our planet this year. Many of them not even discovered till they've gone past our planet for a couple days. But our neighborhood of in our solar system has become very, very busy. Lots and
Yes.
lots of objects, lots of near Earth objects. It's very, very unusual. But why this is important is because one of the things I talk about in the book, Joel, is that eventually, and we see this in the book of Revelation, our planet will get hit by something very, very large. We see this in the
Oh
trumpets.
yeah.
A
Oh
giant
yeah.
mountain burning with fire plunges into the ocean. And God has been giving people supernatural glimpses of this since the Middle Ages. I talk about this in the book, where it's going to happen. A giant space rock is going to hit the Atlantic Ocean, and there's going to be giant tsunamis on the east
Yep.
coast of the United States and other coastal areas too. And the death and destruction will be absolutely enormous. And it's actually talked about right there in the book of Revelation, Revelation chapter 8. And
Yep.
so the fact that so many giant space rocks are now suddenly roaming through our solar system, it's getting my attention. And eventually
And
we will
green.
be hit. It's just a matter of time.
The other intriguing thing is when you're reading Revelation 6:8, you look at it and it talks about the color of the horse, and it might say dappled or it might say muddled or something like that. It's actually green. It's chloros of the Greek people. And so the main thing is we would assume it would be an ugly green, a death green, because that particular horse brings death, a significant death of a quarter of the world's population. So according to this PhD, Ron Joseph, PhD, and then another PhD. Comets are vile stars. They bring death and disease. They bring HCN, and I'm blanking. You're more of a chemist than I am, maybe, but HCN is hydrogen, and it isn't chlorine, but maybe it is chlorine. But either way, it causes disease to come to planets, according to Chinese scientists. Any comments there, Michael?
Well, it's interesting because we see that in Revelation chapter 8, it talks about the waters have gone bitter and many,
Yeah.
many men died because of the waters.
Yep.
So could
Wormwood.
someday when we're hit by a giant space rock, could it make the waters bitter and many men die because of the waters at that stage? That could play into this. But then more more immediately on the timeline, of course, we're watching for pestilences. Matthew 24, Yeshua said there will be pestilences, multiple pestilences
Yes.
in the last days. And so one of the things I'm watching for, along with war, is pestilence, which will
Sure.
kill large numbers of people. We see there in Revelation chapter 6. So pestilence is one of the major themes that I'm watching for. There are many things that could cause it. Bioweapons could cause the next pestilence, and there's many ways it could come about. But when the next great pestilence, Joel, I think the last one caused a lot of people because the death rate was not high. You know,
Are
in
you
fact,
talking
more
about
people
something that
were killed
occurred
by
in
the cures
2020?
than.
Yeah, are you talking about 2020 and that jibby jabber type thing?
Yeah, I'm talking about all that stuff that happened before. And
Yeah,
so
okay.
I don't want to get you in trouble with YouTube
Yeah,
now.
I know we're very careful. We say jibby jabber.
Yeah. But looking forward, because people were like, the last one wasn't that big of a deal, they're not going to take the next one seriously. But you
Yeah,
look at Revelation chapter 6, and pestilence is listed as one of the things that kills a very large percentage of the earth's population. So, and we see this in the prophecies. So we're going to cut up. People need to be prepared when a great pestilence breaks out to potentially stay in your home for weeks or months
yeah,
as pestilence just kills millions and millions of people. I believe that's what's coming, and that's what we see in a lot of these things that God has shown people. There will be pestilences, there will be great death, there will be vast numbers of people dying. But because people were like, oh, the last one was nothing, I'm going to go out and I'm just going to live my life, a lot of people might not take the warning seriously because they remember last time around, and then they'll be then they could end up dead. But great pestilence. In fact, John Paul Jackson, he's
yes,
when he was still alive, he saw a pestilence will come. It won't be that serious. It'll be mostly fear, and then
right.
another one will come, and that one will be serious, right? And then
I
so many
agree.
other people have seen similar things that in the future there is going to be horrific pestilence going to kill vast numbers of people. Don't underestimate it. Don't think it's just like last time and you can go out and do your thing. But people need to be ready to stay at home for an extended period of time because you'll want to keep yourself from this plague as it's killing just vast numbers of people.
Exactly. And so Michael and Miranda, for that matter, have been espousing John Paul Jackson for years. I didn't like his stuff. Well, then I reviewed it again after the jibby jabber, and I realized, no, he's highly accurate now. But that's the problem with modern day prophets. They're going to say something 50 years ago, 80 years ago, something crazy like that, and it's ridiculous at that point in time. You have to review these things a few times over time. Right, Michael?
Oh, it's true. And that's, a lot of the false prophets, the people are constantly getting words like every
Right.
day they have a
Yep.
new word. And,
Yep.
they just they're mostly talking about stuff in the headlines, stuff they've been reading about in the news. But, with the real prophets, they'll often warn about something 6 months or a couple of years or even a couple decades or
Yep.
sometimes hundreds of years in advance,
Yep.
right? And there's stuff in the Bible that you go back and still hasn't been fulfilled yet, right?
Yep.
Because with real prophets, God will sometimes give stuff to people way, way, way in advance. And God is gracious that He warns us way, way in advance. And, so we can know, God wants to give us time in advance, and sometimes He gives us warnings that are very close to the actual event. God works both ways. But yeah, a lot of these false prophets, they're always just constantly talking about stuff that's happening right in the headlines, is because that's where they're getting it. But with the real prophets, sometimes God will show them things that won't happen for a long time to come. But now we're living in a time when so many of these things are literally happening right in front of our eyes. Things are taking place, being fulfilled, because we literally are arriving at that time.
So, quick question from Shirley: could these pestilences be microscopic? Yes. In the Greek, there are four plagues listed in Revelation 6:8 on the fourth horseman, and the fourth one is therion. And in the Greek, that means down to microscopic animals, but it's animals, no doubt about that. And it's always been animals throughout the Bible, but in this case, you can take the Greek all the way down to microscopic or biological warfare. And so there seems to be something with I'm sorry, yeah, okay, where comments have had meaning over the years. People, obviously Yeshua, when he was born, something drifted over his manger or a sukkah, and alerted the shepherds to the wise men to show up and arrive. But in this case, this is more documented, and it's extra biblical. But I'm sorry, let me. Sorry, I'm having problems running the show. Whoop, hide. Okay, there we go. Okay. So bottom line is this is 66 Common Era. This is Josephus writing in his war book, and thus that it was wretched people were deluded at the time by charlatans who pretended messengers of the deity, while they neither heeded nor believed in the manifest portents that foretold the coming desolation, but as if thunderstruck and bereft of eyes and mind, disregarded the plain warnings of God. So it was when a star, resembling a sword, that's a rumphea, I'll explain that in a moment, stood over the city, and a comet which continued for a year. So it was huge over the city, and they knew it was a sword. A rumphea is the word of God in the Bible. It's a sword. It cuts both ways. It's double-edged, and it's powerful. It is the word of God. And so, Michael, any comments about the warning that they received in 66 Common Era?
Yeah, it's interesting. We there, in eclipses, of course, there was an eclipse at the time of Jonah,
Yep.
when he went
Oh
in
yeah.
to
Oh yeah.
preach, and many people believe that's one of the reasons why the people repented, because they'd seen the eclipse, and then Jonah comes in, you know and so comets, eclipses, all throughout history, they've been regarded as harbingers of doom. I believe God has used eclipses, I believe God has used comets. And so I believe and Yeshua specifically warned us, hey, there will be signs, the sun, moon, and stars, to
Yes.
watch for signs in the heavens. So I write about signs in the heavens quite
You do.
frequently. I believe that they're important. Yeshua told us to watch for them. So, um, I think this is a really big. I think this is a really big deal. And it's interesting. You talk about 66, and then the temple is destroyed in 70 A.D. And
Yeah.
we see the in the Talmud, they talk about 40 years from when Yeshua was, from 30 AD to 70 AD. There were those miracles, which didn't happen, and the doors of the temple came open by themselves, and all that. You know what I'm talking about, Joel.
Oh yeah.
You,
Quite well.
from
Yep.
the death of Yeshua in 30 AD to the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. It's another one of those things that confirms that Yeshua really did die on a Jubilee year in 30 AD, according to the Jubilee cycles, which I talked about earlier. And anyway, I just thought I would throw it in there.
It is interesting, people. The signs matter, and Michael is one of the rare people that talks about prophecy and signs in the skies. Nobody else writes about it. I mean, I obviously vlog about it, but I don't write about it anymore. You still write. I'm losing my writing abilities because I'm not writing much anymore, Michael.
Well, there's only so many hours in the day, right? And so
Yeah,
you're doing your show, I'm writing my articles.
yeah.
I mean to do more videos, I just don't have enough time. But we need to start doing more videos here as well. I just got to find the time to get everything done.
People like videos now, and I'm almost ready to go with TikTok and just jump in there and start recording these short little snippets. People want that, and with Larry Ellison buying TikTok, it's no longer Chinese backed, and so it'll be a safe app. So this is interesting. The Chinese have recorded every comet for 6,000 years, and comets preceded plague and disaster. Meticulous observations were compiled in 300 BC, and the comets are vile stars. Again, they indicate that fish grow sick, crops fail, emperors and common people die, and men go to war. Any comments about that, Michael?
Well, you see pestilence there, you see war there, and those
Yeah.
are two of the things that I'm watching for: war, pestilence, so famine. I mean, with crops
Oh yeah.
failing. So we see that, like, the three big things that I'm watching for next. There, we see war, we see famine, and we see pestilence.
Yep.
Right on your graphic there. So that jumped
Yep.
out at me, Joel, because
Yep.
those are the three big things I'm watching for in the months ahead: war, famine. Something's going to come along that's going to cause, because we've got a tremendous global food crisis now, but we're not
Oh, yeah.
seeing like widespread starvation, right? Something's going to happen, I believe, soon, which is going to cause the beginning of the type of famine that we see in the scriptures, I believe. And then So war, famine, and pestilence. And so
Sure,
when I saw those things on the screen, that jumped out at me.
sure. Some various pictures that Ramphea is the sword. And so if you want to have some fun, it doesn't exactly say Ramphea, but when you go to Hebrews 4:12, you'll see that God's word is sharper than any two-edged sword. And so it cuts both ways. So it helps you discern, obviously. So it's interesting that the word Ramphea is used, and comets seem to be that judgment sword in the sky that tells you you better start repenting, people. Or in the case of the Jews in 66 AD, when this comet showed up, they should have run for the hills. They were told by Yeshua, run when the Romans come.
Yeah, and Joel, we don't just have one comet in the sky right now. We've got four giant green comets. Of course, the pale horse is actually a green horse. And
Right?
you talk about the four horsemen of the apocalypse. We got four comets. So, the coincidences are starting to pile up a little bit there.
Yeah,
But so I don't know I don't have all the answers about these comets, but to me, it kind of jumped out at me. This could be important. I should
could
write
be.
about this. So,
And you do.
I,
And thank you. Okay, are we in the birth pangs? I argue that Matthew 24 talks about the birth pangs, and they sound a lot like the seals. Are we potentially in the birth pangs right now, Michael?
well, that is a great question because you correctly pointed out, Joel, Matthew 24 and Revelation 6, they're really parallel passages in so many ways. They
Yeah,
they
they
at
are.
least the beginning portion where
Sure.
they both talk about war, they both talk about famine, they both talk about pestilence, you
Yep.
know and so we see those similar elements there. And so I believe
Yep.
that those they're talking about the same things there. So
Yes.
are we talking about that now? I don't believe that the some people believe the red horse has already run. I do not believe that. I am
Okay. All right.
watching for the red horse. I'm watching
Okay.
for peace to be taken from the earth. And
Okay.
that jumps back to what we had talked about at the beginning of the show, right? That in order for peace to be taken from the earth, a condition of peace must exist first,
Right.
right? So now we
Right.
finally have peace in the Middle East. We have a peace that can be taken away. And so I'm watching for peace to be taken from the Middle East. So I'm watching for that. So I believe that when the red horse runs, that we will know it, that we will see it, that we will be aware of that. And so that is something to watch for. Now, we just talked about famine. I believe the black horse. Now, what could cause because the black horse seems to talk about a really widespread, not just a famine in one particular area, but something that is global, something that's worldwide. So, what could cause that? Well, there's a number of things that could potentially cause a global famine. If something happens with the sun, some type of something that caused the sun to send less heat or more heat, or whatever, something with the sun has been behaving strangely, but maybe more likely is a limited nuclear exchange in the Middle East. That could potentially also cause maybe a limited nuclear winter, which could cause famine, or certainly the volcano, specifically eruption of a super volcano. People think of Yellowstone, but the super volcano over in Italy has really been
Oh
shaking
yeah.
thousands and thousands of earthquakes. If that erupted, that would cause a volcanic winter, which could potentially cause a global famine. So we don't know exactly what's going to cause the black horse, the famine, but the things I mentioned are possibilities, and there are other things which could cause a worldwide famine too. So we'll see. We'll see, Joel.
It
That
is
those are some of
intriguing,
the things
though.
that I'm going to watch for the black horse.
Yeah, it is intriguing that the Matthew 24 kind of lines up like the seals in many ways. There's a similarity between, let's see, the first one is ethnos, epi, ethnos, and then basileia. So ethnic groups fighting against ethnic groups. Well, we're seeing that. And kingdoms fighting against kingdoms. We're seeing that. And then famines and plagues, limol and loimol, and then quakes, and then in various places and other things like that. It sounds like the sixth seal when you get to the quakes. And so it's just interesting, people. Keep your options open in terms of what your eschatology looks like. Don't go in. Michael is open and it's always researching. I am too. But look at the signs and regard them for what they mean biblically. Don't just go in with some dogmatic view. Any comments, Michael?
Well, yeah, a lot of people were really dogmatic about a pre-tribulation rapture in September, right?
Yeah.
They were so sure that they were going up, and that was extremely unfortunate. That was so sad. And really the tragedy, one of the great tragedies of it is because people think, well, all throughout Christian history, believers have been getting slaughtered for their
Yeah.
faith,
Yeah.
facing persecution and death, had to
Yeah.
make life and death choices. And that's happening in Nigeria today, right? I
Oh, yeah.
recently wrote about the genocide of Christians in Nigeria happening right now. Thousands of Christians have been killed this year. And millions have been forced out of their homes over the past number of years. They're in Nigeria. Of course, Christians in North Korea are being taken to concentration camps.
Yes.
Christians in China are being disappeared, and children are banned to even from going to church until they're eight. They become adults. In India, hundreds and hundreds of churches are being burned down. And then places like Iran and Afghanistan and throughout many Islamic countries become converting to Christianity can be a death sentence. And yet we here in the Western world, we think, oh, we're never going to have to face any persecution. We're so
Right.
special. We're
Right.
so
Right.
good. We're going to get a free ride out of here. And then, all these people that are being taught this, Joel, when
Yeah.
it doesn't happen, they're going to fall into a pit of despair and depression
Yes.
when that's the exact opposite response that you're supposed to have to the end times, because God put us here for a reason. He has a job for us to do. We're not supposed to go over into a corner and curl up into a fetal position and cry and moan and groan and say, woe is me, I'm depressed, I don't want to be here. God put us here for a reason. If God didn't think you could handle what's coming, he wouldn't have put you here. Now is the time to rise up, become the person that God created you to be, and go out and build the kingdom of God, because
There
there's
you go.
8 billion
Amen.
souls hanging in the balance. When the apostles were running around, there were maybe about 100 million souls running around the planet. We've got 8 billion souls that we need to be concerned about, that we need to be winning for the kingdom. And we've got a job to do. Time is running out. And if you wanted to live in biblical times, you're going to get your chance. And in any great movie, in any great story, the heroes always have to go through something. They always have to go through great challenges before you get to the end, right? And
Yep.
our story is not going to be any different. We're going to have to go through challenges. We're going to have to go through great things when, things that are going to test our faith, things that are going to seem like they're crazy. And we get to be here when all of human history is building up to this grand crescendo. So we're at the end of the
Yes.
movie when
Yes.
everything's coming up to the end, when the biggest challenges are, right? And we get
Yep.
to be here. That's not a
Yeah.
curse. That's a privilege.
That's a
That's
blessing.
not a reason to go in the corner and cry. That's a reason to say, hey, we got a job to do. We got people to reach
Amen.
with the gospel. We want to reach the whole world. We want to complete the job and prepare the way for the return of our Lord and Savior, Yeshua HaMashiach. And we want to be told, well done, good and faithful servant. And,
Yeah.
and each one of us has a specific job to do. What I do is not what Joel's been called to do. And what you've been called to do, I couldn't do. You've got people to reach that I could never reach. So each one of us has something specific that we're supposed to do before we go. And we need to be about the business, our Father's business, of accomplishing the tasks that He's given us to do.
Cool. Okay, so there is a white horse. I think it opened as Israel handed back the Temple Mount. Now, I could be wrong, but I go back about 50 years then. And so it is intriguing well, here, I'll go to this slide. I think the two things that, if this is open, that are coming against us right now are radical Islam and cultural Marxism. And Hillary and number 44 seem to be those types of people. So whether you agree with me on the seals or not, Michael, these are two of the problems, but you cite a third problem. What are those?
Well, in addition to the far left, which is rising up, and we're seeing in Portland, we're seeing in Chicago, the rioting, We've
Yep.
got radical Islam. I recently saw a video in Philadelphia where they now have dozens of mosques. But in Philadelphia, I saw a video of a football field filled with Muslims worshiping and praying and doing their thing. And I thought, we could never do that with Christians. If we went there and tried to hold a revival,
Oh
we couldn't
no.
fill up a football stadium. But this football stadium in Philadelphia was filled with Muslims. And we've got cities like Dearborn, Michigan, which is it's a majority Muslim city now in the United States. But we've got
Yep.
radical Islam rising in this country, along with tens of millions of illegal immigrants. So we're coming at
Yes.
this time, and we've got the No Kings protest. I know you're going to talk about that, and
That's coming up. There you go. Yeah, let's go there.
millions of people are going to, angry people are going to be taking to the streets this weekend, and we've got civil unrest, we've got rioting, we've got the protest. For example, the ICE facility in Portland was under siege for months by crazed leftists. The police wouldn't do anything. We're seeing the civil unrest, the civil disorder, the and the beginnings of the internal revolution, which people like me have been warning about for more than a decade, but it was
Yep.
coming. Dimitri
Yep.
Duduman warned about it. So many people warned
Yep.
about it.
Yep.
But a violent revolution. The left was even talking about it before Donald Trump won the election. And now they're starting to talk about secession. They're
Yes.
beginning to talk about, and this is on leftist websites. If you haven't seen it, it's probably because you don't read leftist websites. But they're talking about having blue states secede from the United States. This is the point
Yeah.
they're at. They're so angry. They're so upset. We're seeing violence. We're seeing the shootings. We're seeing the mass shootings. We're seeing ICE facilities being attacked. We're seeing mass protests in the streets. In fact, this weekend they're expecting 5 million people, 5
Oh my.
million crazed people take to the streets. Joel, this is it. And as
Mostly
economic conditions
peaceful.
get worse, oh,
Mostly
go ahead.
peaceful. Mostly peaceful.
Not mostly peaceful at all. But this is part of the perfect storm. This is part of the end time scenario. This is part of what was prophesied to come to the United States at this time. So this is another piece that's being fulfilled right on time, and it's here, and it's going to get a lot worse.
So the second seal is in the Hebrew "lachak shalom," which is snatching peace. And I argue that it's already been occurred. Sometimes I think it's 2001, but there is an odd thing going on in 2003 where they were digging. Oh goodness, the epics of Gilgamesh, that area where they were digging underneath the Euphrates River, and they found his gravesite. And they didn't want to open it up because, well, I don't know. There are people in the world that didn't want it opened at that point in time. Bush immediately invaded within minutes after figuring out that they had found. It's not Nimrod. It's the other. It's Gilgamesh, basically finding his gravesite. That they then we invaded Iraq, and now it's been shut down all of these years. But there is this odd time frame in Revelation 9, the sixth trumpet, where these four creatures come out of underneath the Euphrates River and attack the world with 2 million soldiers. And so, or is it 200 million? And it doesn't matter. It's a lot of soldiers. And so it seems like some aspects of peace have been snatched from the earth, but maybe more will occur.
And many people believe Gilgamesh is Nimrod. For that matter, that the two
Okay.
are
All
one and the
right.
same.
Sure.
Many scholars believe that. But it's interesting. You look at the trumpets, and
Yep.
you literally see an invasion of the earth, beginning with the fifth trumpet, where you see the creatures come out, and they
Yeah.
torment people for a number of months, and they have a king over them, and it's
Yes.
the beast that arises from the abyss, and that is actually the arrival of the Antichrist. It's actually an invasion of the Antichrist to this planet. And throughout the rest of the book of Revelation, that the term Antichrist isn't used. That's what we use, and it's used other places in the Bible. But the term that's used in the book of Revelation is the beast, more
Yes.
specifically, the beast that arises from the abyss. And
Yes.
that's the Antichrist. And the Antichrist, some people envision him as like kind of a greasy politician who comes and takes control of the United Nations. But the book of Revelation refers to him as the beast that comes from the abyss. And it's
Yes.
literally an invasion of our planet by the Antichrist with his forces. And the forces that you referred to at the sixth trumpet are part of that invasion of
Yes.
the Antichrist, which is going to allow him to take control of the globe. And a whole lot of people are going to die in the process.
Oh,
But
yeah.
so people who are looking for they're playing guess the Antichrist. Which politician is it? But meanwhile, they're totally understanding what's happening in the trumpets there, where we're literally going to see an invasion of planet Earth by the armies of Antichrist. And to a lot of people, it's going to look like the invasion of Earth by Christ. They're going to misinterpret it. And
Right.
Antichrist, of course, is one who comes in place of Christ. And so when the Antichrist comes with his armies, people are going to think, oh, that's Christ coming with his armies. And they're going to be totally fooled. And that's going to be extremely unfortunate because they're getting a lot of bad teaching about Revelation chapter 8.
Yes. Okay, so the third seal, the third horseman, is where inflation occurs. And Michael writes about this. You actually get this better than anybody else on the planet. What I'd like to add on the bottom here is that it seems as though the price of wheat and barley are more for the regular folks, but the oil, it's expensive oil, it's shemen, it would be olive oil, and the wine, yain, would be for the wealthy. You may not harm. And the word there is adekesis, which transfers into avanim. So it's a willful sin. It looks like the wealthiest of the people will not want the poor people to have any of their treasures, so to speak. And so you'll see this disparity that's already occurring right now via inflation and other things like that, where the wealthy get wealthier and the poor get poorer. Right, Michael?
Yeah, in fact, the gap between the wealthiest and the poor is greater than ever in the United States and worldwide. We've got 1 billion people living in slums now worldwide. We've got the worst, according to CNN, the worst hunger crisis in human history right now. In the United States, homelessness is at an all-time record high. Demand at food banks is at an all-time record high. We've got hunger exploding all around us. Much of the population is barely scraping by. A recent survey found 67% of US workers, these are people that actually are employed, are living paycheck to paycheck. We've got 42 million Americans are on food stamps, which those are about to be cut off next month if the government shutdown doesn't end. Meanwhile, the wealthy are doing better than ever. So it's interesting that we see this, dichotomy in the third seal. Because you talk to someone wealthy about the economy, and they're like, "What's the big deal? Everything's great. I'm doing wonderfully. The stock market has been near all-time record highs for the moment. That's not going to be indefinite, but for now, the wealthy are doing great, but the poor are really suffering. So
Oh, yeah,
that
they are.
that's very interesting.
Okay, and this came out in 2019. This is from The Economist magazine. And if you look very carefully, you'll see on the right hand side the four horsemen of the apocalypse. And it is intriguing. If you study Revelation 6 8 carefully, you'll notice that all four horses seem to come together then and ride together and pound away. And so, what was the Economist magazine, which is a WEF type of people, Klaus Schwab, those types of people. Were they predicting the fourth horseman? I don't know. But within months after this was published, or maybe days, we went into the jibby jabber and those issues that came from China. Any comments, Michael?
Well, yeah, and one of the things that greatly upsets me because we're talking about a crime against humanity on a scale that I don't even have the words to describe. Not It's not just against the American people, but against the whole world, where
Yep.
millions upon millions died, and we see this in the excess mortality statistics from around the world, and then far more were seriously injured, maimed for
Yes.
life, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
Um, but and we spread this all over the world. It wasn't just here, but there's been no apology, right?
No.
There's
Nothing.
there's there's been no taking these things off the market. There's and that greatly upsets me because, and I hold those people in positions of leadership who were involved before and are involved now and have been involved throughout the whole process accountable, because it really is evil on
It
an
is. It is.
extreme
It
level,
is.
and it's an evil deserving of judgment. Of course, virtually every form of evil that you can possibly imagine, every form of evil in the Torah is exploding in our society like crazy. So
Yes.
everywhere you look, it's just evil, great evil, tremendous evil all around us. Of course, that's one of the ways we know we're living in the end times. But our society, a lot of people, when the judgments, major judgments come upon America, they're not going to understand. They're going to be like, I was told that we're so good, we're such a wonderful nation, and the church has told me that we're so pleasing to God and everything's wonderful. No, our society is absolutely saturated with wickedness and
Yes.
evil, and it's all around us. It's everywhere you look, and we can literally talk hours about that.
Yes. You're right. Okay, so this is the fifth seal, and Michael was talking about this. I didn't clip your article. I'm sorry. I should have grabbed that instead. But this is Ted Cruz blames Nigeria for mass murder of Christians. What's the truth? And Al Jazeera is publishing this. And so Cruz said since 2009, over 50,000 Christians in Nigeria have been massacred, and over 20,000 churches and Christian schools have been destroyed. Thoughts about that, Michael?
Yeah, when's the last time you heard about this from the mainstream media? Literally, if it was a
Not a chance.
genocide of a group favored by the left, it would be headline news all the time, right?
Right.
You know, because it's a genocide of Christians, we never hear about it. And that's one of the
No.
reasons I did my article, to bring some awareness to it. But it's not just happening in Nigeria. Nigeria is kind of the epicenter there in Africa of what's going on. But wherever you see Islam bump up against Christianity in Africa, there's killings, there's violence, there's slaughtering. It's happening all over the continent in Africa, and it's horrible. Of course, there's been persecution of Christians all over the Middle East for ages, for as long, for our entire lifetimes, and in many Islamic nations, I mean, it's against the law to convert. If you do, well, you're
Right.
potentially facing a death sentence. And then in some of the worst persecution is in Asia, where we've talked about the concentration camps in North Korea, the burning of just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of churches in India. Christian pastors just get disappeared. A van will come along, grab a pastor in China, and you'll never hear from them again in some
Right.
cases. I mean, just horrible persecution. But it's all over the world. In fact, most of the world's population lives in a country where there's a substantial level of Christian persecution. We're fortunate, if we live in the United States, to still live in a country where we can worship relatively freely, although we're
Yes.
mocked and persecuted in different ways too. Um, but um, but then, of course, if we're messianic, you know, we get a special fate for being messianic, because
Yes.
the world hates us. Okay,
Yes.
but then the Jewish people, they're not too keen on messianics.
No.
Especially if you go over to Israel, they're not too keen on people that keep the Sabbaths and festivals, but then worship Yeshua. They're not too keen on that.
Right.
But then the Christians look at us and they're like, oh, you guys are all messed up. We don't like you. The Hebrew roots people, we're going to say all kinds of nasty things about you. So we're not only hated by the world, but we're also kind of, we're looked down upon by the Christians. We're looked down upon by the Jews. Everyone kind of dislikes the Messianics, right, Joel? So
It's been fun to be called into this.
yeah, we get it from all directions, but this is just the beginning, because we've got to prepare the church for the times when the Antichrist does arrive, because there will be global persecution, life and death choices. People have to face life and death choices, and of course the churches aren't preparing for them for that. People to face that, because they're saying, "Oh, you're going to get out of here. You don't have to worry
Right.
about that." So they're not facing it's a tremendous disservice because people are not being prepared to face martyrdom, but that's
Right.
exactly what we need to be preparing the churches and the people to do.
True. Now, as of tonight, we could start seeing a solar storm hit, and there should be four of them coming. Okay. And so, even though that's not exactly what occurs with the sixth seal, it is intriguing that you're going to start noticing auroras. Michael, have you taken the kids out and shown them the auroras? Have you seen any of them? You're in Idaho. Are you in northern Idaho or southern?
Oh, I'm in the northern half of the state,
Have you seen
but
any auroras?
where we specifically are located, we don't get them really good here for some reason.
Oh,
But
oh,
other areas do in this region of the country. So, it just depends where you're located. But I am watching the sun, Joel, because the sun has been
yeah,
behaving very strangely for a number of
right.
years.
Yes,
And I believe this is going to become a big story. I believe the sun is behaving very weirdly. We're seeing solar storms pretty frequently. And I
very
believe at
frequently.
some point our grid is going to get hit. I
Yep.
believe there are going to be blackouts. I believe our power grid is going to be affected. I believe this is going to be part of a bigger part of the story here moving forward. So let's keep an eye on the sun because the Book of Revelation talks about the sun quite a bit. Things going on with the sun,
Oh,
and
yeah.
especially once we get to the very end,
Oh,
the
it's
sun gets really
brutal.
kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But I think the behavior of the sun is going to be a big story. So I'm definitely watching it.
So this is interesting because I think this is a micronova because the exact phrase is sakos trichonos in the Greek, which means like a coating of mohair over the sun, and then it explodes like a micronova, and it doesn't wipe us out permanently. That happens in the fourth bowl or the fifth bowl. And you were right with that. The sun does explode then, and that turns us into a Stone Age situation. But in this case, it looks like we probably go through about 3 months, maybe 4 months of no power, basically a blackout. And so, people, you have to prepare for that. If you're sitting in a situation where you can't recover from that, you might die, you know? And so, Michael has been thinking about this for 10, 20 years, and his family's ready to go and in a good location, too.
Well, we all need to be prepared, and preparation looks different for everybody, and God
Right.
has called us all to do different things. But I always say the safest place to be is right in the center of God's will.
Sure.
So, for example, in my books, I talk about California is not a good place to be, especially for
No.
the things that are coming. You probably don't want to be in California, but if God is calling you to be in California, that's exactly where you need to be because He's going to keep you safe for at least as long as for the job He has for you to do in California. He's going to keep you safe to do that job. So that ultimately, we want to be wherever God is calling us to be for the times that are coming. And I'm a big believer in getting prepared and doing all those things. And we could do a full show about all that.
Oh, yeah.
But there will be times when you will need to stay at home. And if you only have
Yes.
a week's amount of food in your refrigerator, what are you going to do? There will be times when you have to stay home for an extended period of time. And so you need to be prepared for that.
Okay. Do you think the Earth is wobbling? Do you think the poles are moving and they're acting like a drunk? Have you been monitoring that?
Well, the magnetic field is certainly acting very, very strangely, and the crust of the Earth is becoming more active. We're seeing an unusual amount of earthquakes and volcanoes and very strange activities. So, a lot of people speculate about exactly what's causing all of that, but we have seen uh, very, very strange natural disasters. Of course, nothing like we're going to see,
Right.
not too in the not too distant future. But yeah, our planet itself, I do believe, is becoming increasingly unstable.
So there was a report out the other day. I have not clipped it yet. I'm sorry, but it was from the ESA, so European Space Agency, that said we have lost 30% of our magnetosphere, which protects us from UV and from proton storms. And we have four proton storms coming at us right now. and they're going to hit over the next few days. So, people, if you get the opportunity, I'm in Minnesota. I go out all the time and watch auroras, and it's quite active here, especially since 2023. So it looks like we've had geomagnetic jerks lately, and that means the crust is kind of losing that connection, that weird connection to the core. And so I showed you Isaiah 24 here. That's about the only place where you get a specific idea of what God is going to be doing to us during the end days, when our sins cause the world to have the poles flipped. And we seem to be starting that process as of 2023, May of 2023. This is Zero Hedge, who you write for. I don't think you wrote this, but this is about robots. In 2 to 3 years, they're predicting robots. So churning out. So this is about China. These industrialists went to China and started looking around at their factories and realized they didn't see any human beings. It was all robots doing all the work. Any thoughts, Michael?
Yeah, it's amazing. China has surpassed us. They've been adding robots at a faster pace than the rest of the world combined. And you go over there now, and there's factories, and the article they're referring to, I read the original article,
Oh, okay.
where there's factories now where you go in and there's only a couple people there to make sure the factory's still running, but they don't
Yep.
even turn the lights on in some cases because there's no humans on the factory floor. It's just all robots, and they're all working, and they do everything. Everything from the beginning to the end of the process is automated, and the work is done by robots. And so this is another reason why we should be glad that Yeshua is returning, because not just robots, but of course, but AI and everything. Human workers are being replaced increasingly by in so many ways. And so eventually we could get to a point where robots and AI and technology can do almost everything better and cheaper and more efficiently than humans can. So when we get to that point, and already we're losing jobs, well, what are we going to be needed for? What are we going to do? How are we going to make a living? You know, so the future for already the gap between the wealthy and the poor is greater than ever. And now the wealthy aren't even going to need us to run their businesses or run their factories or assemble things anymore. What are they going to need us for? Right? We're going to become useless eaters.
You
So
said
the
it.
future for the poor, the future for average workers is not a bright future. Is not a bright future, Joel.
So, according to how I interpret Revelation 17 and a little bit in 13, you've got these 10 horns. And I argue, and so does Gary Stearman from, oh goodness, Prophecy. I'm blanking on their show right now. But Mondo Gonzalez and Gary Stearman agree with me. We all saw this back in 2021, that it seems like it's the billionaires that are tech giants that are going to come together, and it's not going to be kings over in Europe or anything like that. It's going to be these guys that are going to build the databases that will control us via the robots. So they're predicting robots within 2 years, everywhere robots, and these will be general IQ robots at first, but then they'll be super IQ by 2031, they're predicting.
Well, it would be a very scary future, because they're talking about humans merging with technology, and the singularity could only be
Yes.
virtually just a few years away, right? The
Right.
transhumanists are very excited, but given enough time, what would the world look like 10 or 20 or 30 years from now? I think it would look a lot, very much like, science fiction movies, and not in a good way. And
Yeah.
so that's another reason we should be glad that Yeshua is coming back to rescue us from, where the world is heading. And not only in this way with technology, but in so many ways. Yeshua coming back is great, great news, because this world is becoming a very, very dark place. So we need Yeshua to come back. We desperately need it. And if he didn't come back, well, in so many ways, the birds are going extinct, the fish are going extinct, the bugs
Yes.
are going extinct, and humanity would go extinct pretty much within 100 years anyway, as I talk about in my books. So either Yeshua comes back, or basically everyone's going extinct pretty much. Um, so yeah, we need Yeshua to come back to rescue us from ourselves. So we should be very thankful that these are the end times, because the future that humanity is looking at in so many ways is not good.
Amen. And so, it's interesting as we wrap things up. We've got the left cheered louder for Charlie Kirk's death than they did for Trump ending the Israel and Gaza war, and then we see these hotels being set up across the world where the people that are doing the bad things are being rewarded, and they're doing more bad things as a result. So that seems to be dystopian and where we're going.
Well, yeah, our society is more divided than it ever has been in my entire lifetime. And unfortunately, we're going to see more violence. We're going to see things get crazy, especially once we get to the stage, Joel, which isn't yet. Right now, we're seeing the beginnings. We're seeing civil unrest. We're seeing rioting. But eventually, when we get to the point when society is totally breaking down, and things and we don't even have a stable society anymore, we're going to see rioting, looting, killing, raping, people from no poor neighborhoods going to rich neighborhoods, looting rich neighborhoods. All the It's not going to be a good time to be in a highly populated area. It's not going to be a good time to be in our major cities.
Right.
And so hopefully people are praying about where God wants them to be, as our society really eventually is going to resemble a Mad Max society, is
Yes,
eventually where all this is heading.
you're correct. And then any thoughts on the red heifer or the red
Yeah,
heifers?
yeah, Joel, it's interesting because we were told that was a practice run, right? But
Right.
the guy that did it, he was actually, Byron Stinson helped bring the red heifers over from Texas. And then, and for a long time we were told, oh, we have these red heifer candidates. And then the Temple Institute came out and said, oh, they've all been disqualified. But Byron Stinson said, no, these are, he picked out what he believed was a legitimate red heifer. And he had someone that was a Kohen that was raised from birth to perform the sacrifice. And the Temple Institute, of course, says it has to be on the Mount of Olives, which the scriptures don't actually say, but he performed it according to the scriptural mandates. And
Yes.
according to Byron Stinson, it was a real red heifer sacrifice for the
Right.
first time in more than 2,000 years. So, according to him, it was a real thing. It was a real red heifer sacrifice.
Yes.
According to the Temple Institute, no, it was just a practice run. It was a disqualified red heifer, and it actually has to be done on the Mount of Olives. So we have this dichotomy between Byron Stinson, who said, yeah, I did it. It was a real thing. It was legit. And he's got the ashes of the red heifer, which is actually giving to different people. And there, someone actually took it on one of these big podcasts and said, look, I got that ashes of the red heifer. And then we got the Temple Institute that says, no, it's still coming, whatever. So there's a big debate about all of it. It's very, very interesting. But we'll see how all this plays out.
Okay, we'll spend a couple of seconds on this because it's probably time to get going. But I call it pin the tail on the Antichrist, which means we don't know who the Antichrist is, but people play the game regardless. And so, in which chapter of Revelation 6 are we doing today? Obviously. So, is Trump the Antichrist?
No, no. The Donald Trump is not the Antichrist. There's a very small group of people who are claiming that. Very small.
Okay.
But no. Trump is not the Antichrist. Biden's not the Antichrist. Obama's not the Antichrist. There's still some people that believe that. But like I said earlier, there's for so long, and it's because of what we've been taught, right? For
Yeah.
decades, we were taught that the Antichrist is this greasy politician who comes and he becomes super popular and the world loves them and he takes control of the United Nations and then he does this thing. But no, the Antichrist doesn't even come till the fifth trumpet. He doesn't even
Right.
come till the
Mm-hmm.
the the,
Mm-hmm.
the 7 years is till you know the 7 years we're kind of in the middle.
Yep.
We're at the fifth trumpet, and he's the beast that rises out of the abyss with his armies. It's described right there. It's the invasion of the Antichrist. People think he's going to come sneaking along, this politician, then he's going to finally reveal himself. No, when the Antichrist comes, you're not going to miss it if you're still alive. It's going
Right.
to be the invasion of the Antichrist with his armies. It's right there in Revelation chapter 8. And so I know that I'm take a different view than more than 90% of the end times Bible prophecy teachers out
Right.
there. But my guide is the book of Revelation. And the way that I see it is the beast does not arise until the fifth trumpet. And we got a lot of stuff to go through till we get there.
Good point. Good point. Are any of these people potentially going to turn into the Antichrist?
No, 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 no way. No, 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 no way. Now,
Okay.
you know,
Okay.
the global leaders today, they're playing a role. They're playing a role in setting the stage. They're
Right.
involved in
Okay.
events
Sure.
described in the Bible. They're involved in things that are going to happen. They're involved in things that I've written about in my books. But no, no, not the Antichrist.
And it's so frustrating because you write great books, but then they're out of date within weeks sometimes because of an agreement like this, that seems to be increasing right now. We could add a bunch of countries onto the Abraham Accords. Could those be the peace agreement of Daniel 9:27? I'll try to find that particular. Yeah, we won't cover that. Well, you covered that and you didn't cover him. Daniel 9:27, we talk about the various criteria for that. Is it possible that the Abraham Accords could fit into that breach, we call it, a covenant?
Well, I have once again, a very different view from the vast majority of those out there, because, we've all been taught that Antichrist confirms the covenant
Right.
in
Yeah.
Daniel 9:27, but I just
Yeah.
talked about the fact that Antichrist doesn't even arise till the fifth trumpet, you
Okay.
know? So I don't believe that's possible, okay?
Okay.
So, and in fact, I don't believe that this is in Daniel 9:27, and I was taught this, and decades ago, I actually taught this, that, oh yeah, there's going to be this peace agreement with Israel. But then I started studying it, and the word for covenant there is
Breach. Yeah.
the exact same word for covenant is used earlier in Daniel chapter 9, and it's used for God's covenant with Israel.
Sure. Yeah.
So I believe that that word there for covenant is not some type of peace agreement in 2025. It's not some type of peace treaty, but it's referring to God's covenant with his people, and that God's covenant with his people will be confirmed. And I go on in my books to talk about the rest of this verse and beyond about what it's really talking about. So all these people that are waiting for this Middle East peace agreement to fulfill Daniel 9:27, I believe that they're taught that they're completely barking up a wrong tree. But if people
Okay.
disagree with me, that's okay. We're not all going to agree with everything. You know, you ask 10 different Bible prophecy teachers their theories of end times, you're going to get 10 different theories. And in fact, it's very unfortunate because a lot of Bible prophecy teachers hate other Bible prophecy teachers because they teach different things. I'm
Oh my
not like that. If you
God.
disagree with me, that's okay. I'm still
Yeah.
going to love with
Okay.
you. I'm still going to fellowship with you, you know. So just because you disagree with me about Daniel 9:27, that's okay. We can still love one another and everything's going to be good.
Okay. And then we have other players and things like that. Elon, I mean, he's not involved with much right now, but he is an interesting man to watch an MBS out of Saudi Arabia or Xi from China, although he might lose his power very shortly here because Xi is in trouble financially. The whole country is.
Well, we will want to watch China because war with in fact, we just saw just days ago the economic relations between our two countries fell
Oh
apart.
yeah.
Trump is saying, "Hey, we're going to hit China with 100% tariff on top of the existing tariffs because China greatly restricted rare earth exports, which they have
Yep.
virtually a monopoly on." But history has shown Oh, history has shown that trade wars often have a way of becoming shooting wars, and
Yes,
there will
yes.
eventually be a war with China, is one of the things I write about in my book. So that is coming. So we will want to watch China very closely.
They want Taiwan, no doubt about it. I think that's about it because we don't need to cover this guy. He's not the Antichrist. He might die soon. I mean, he's got pancreatic cancer. That's not a good sign.
Yeah, I was at a conference about a decade ago where someone got up and was teaching that King Charles is the Antichrist.
Yeah,
It's no, he's
yeah,
not the Antichrist.
he's
But
not.
yeah, he's another of the usual suspects that they bring out. It's unfortunate.
All right, we're at 2 hours. We had a lot of fun with Michael. Thank you, Michael Snyder. Would you do me a favor and pop your book up one more time so people can see it? And there you
Sure,
go.
it's called 10 Prophetic Events That Are Coming Next. It's available in paperback, Kindle format, and in audiobook on Amazon.com. And if you want to get my latest end times research right in your email inbox, you can sign up for my newsletter at michaeltsnyder.substack.com.
There you go, people. I read them all the time. I'm not always sure. I can kind of tell your writing style now. So I say, okay, who actually wrote this article? Or the other thing is the video. Oh goodness, I'm blanking on the name of the people. But do you have? Are you writing any videos where they're just taking your content and drop because they cite you every now and then? I want to say it's usually an economic type of the economic collapse type of a thing, but it's a video and it's a British guy that always announces for it.
I think you're referring to the Epic Economist channel.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
they'll take my articles and make videos out of them. I'm not
Okay.
associated with that channel at all. So, in fact, the guy who runs it, I've interacted with him years ago. He's in Romania or something.
Oh,
Who the
okay.
guy actually behind the channel? But no, but many YouTube channels do a similar thing where they discuss my articles or make videos out of my articles. But my philosophy has always been republish my work, use my work, get my work out there because my philosophy is the more people that are exposed to my work, the more good it will do. So,
Yes.
I don't get any income or any benefit from these people who are taking my work and putting it all over the place, but I'm glad they are because it gets the message out there and that's the main thing.
Yeah, the Epic Economist is an interesting video series. I watch it every now and then. I can just kind of smell there's a little Michael Snyder being written in there. So that's too bad that they're not giving you any money or anything for because they are well watched. You know, good ratings.
They are. And so the main thing is to sound the alarm. And so I appreciate anyone that uses my work. And if people have their own websites, republish my articles, spread the word, share the articles, share my books. Because I would like to get a copy of this book to everybody in America because these are the things that are coming. And I wish I could literally get that book into the hands of everybody in the country.
Well, I'll
It's
be picking
that
it up.
important.
The other book that I had from you that I cited, The Lost Prophecies, that's 5 years old. I didn't realize that. So it's probably time for me to update.
Yeah, and actually, the two books I've got it here too, "Lost Prophecies of the Future of
Yeah.
America."
Yeah.
This new book, 10 Prophetic Events, is kind of almost an updated version. It's
It
great to read
is.
those two together. But I've got 10 books that are out there now on Amazon that people can get. So hopefully, people will make use of that because I put a lot of work into those books, and
Oh, yeah. I can tell.
and it's in the books where I go in a real deep dive in the end times and the timelines and the Jubilee and some of the things we were talking about in this program. I don't want to do a lot of that in the articles. In the articles, I mostly focus on current events. But if you want a deep dive into the end times, get the books because you'll really enjoy them.
Perfect. All right, Michael Snyder, thank you for a great show. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We took a few questions. We could have taken more, but I think you were impressed with what Michael told you. So thank you, Michael. God bless, and